Hey Rob, how are you doing?
Hey Richard, I'm good. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, Barbenheimer. Which one you saw? Which one first?
Well, of course, I saw Oppenheimer first. I wasn't going to see Barbie at all until you told me that we should see it. This is the kind of movie that I would ordinarily avoid, but I did see a lot of chatter online about it, and a lot of people are reading into it in different ways, coming up with different messages, and so I figured, it'll be an interesting sort of moment
Yeah,
to analyze this piece of the culture.
yeah. Well, the Barbie. I mean, the you know the promotion for Barbie was like unlike any other movie I can remember seeing. I mean,
If you
there
open
was
Google, I don't know if they were still doing this, but for a
yeah.
while, if you go to the Google homepage, it was like pink and like little pink fireworks, and
If you search
yeah, it
for
was.
Barbie, if you
I'd never
search for
seen that.
Barbie, if you search for Barbie or Gosling or Margot Robbie,
I mean,
that,
that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, it wasn't their
yeah,
homepage, but yeah,
and
like I googled Barbie movie and everything was pink.
And Michael Tracy had a thing where like he walked into like a grocery store. They had all these like cakes and cupcakes, like all in like Barbie, Barbie flavor and Barbie movie stuff. So it was everywhere. They built like a giant mansion in L.A. or Malibu or something that got on the news that was all pink. And so it's this was going to be huge, no matter what, because it's Barbie IP. And then yeah, Oppenheimer was also the same week, and it was the same day release, in July 21st. It was also huge, but not as big as uh, Barbie. I
Is
want
that
to
true? It did Oppenheimer not do as well at the box office? I
No,
actually
Barbie's
checked.
Barbie. I mean, they both did like great. They were both like really huge smashes, but Barbie outperformed Oppenheimer. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I mean, it was
Appeals to a wider
promotion.
audience. Oppenheimer is definitely like I could I don't know if is this a dual feature review, but Oppenheimer, they did their best, I think, or Nolan and his team did their best to sort of hold the audience's hand to explain what was happening. But I could tell, like looking around, people were sort of reaching the end of their patience in that movie. Whereas
Yeah.
Barbie, anyone can understand, 7-year-old can understand Barbie. So it kind of makes sense in a way. In the same way that like country music is actually the most popular music in America because everyone of every age will listen to it. I think like Barbie has that kind of widespread appeal.
Well, I mean, it's just girls. I mean, just the promotion. The promotion was amazing. So they say in 5 days, Barbie crossed 200 million and Oppenheimer crossed 100 million. So they were
Oh,
both
that much more. Wow.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was the Barbie. I mean, the promotion. Oppenheimer didn't have that much promotion. I mean, there was an Oppenheimer cake and houses and so forth. I mean, it got some attention, but the Barbie thing was just like a cultural. And Barbie, girls, kids are going to go see Barbie. So, yeah. Um, and I think we should. I mean, I think we should talk about Oppenheimer first because I think that like as I wrote in my review of Oppenheimer, it insults Oppenheimer to put it in the same category with Barbie, just because they came out the same day. I think the Barbie movie was awful. I mean, it could be good just because it was a sort of silly subject doesn't mean that it couldn't have been a great piece of art. But it wasn't a good piece of art. It was just trash. And the Oppenheimer movie was great. You said that people in the theater were running out of patience. I saw it in like the middle of the day, like at 11 a.m. Yesterday. And so the
Was it
theater
full?
apparently no,
Oh.
Barbie wasn't full either. I mean, I went at
Oh.
the same time. I went like 11 a.m. Like I saw some people,
Okay.
it was like the local mall here in LA County, and yeah, I mean, like there was 20 people or something. I mean, it was mostly completely empty. Like, what time did you go to these things?
I mean, I went to see Oppenheimer Saturday evening and then Barbie Sunday evening, and both times it was like probably 90% to 100% capacity. It was
Yeah,
both were full. Different, somewhat different demographic breakdown. I think Oppenheimer was probably skewed like 60-70% male, and then the Barbie movie was sort of flipped where it was 60 to 7% female. But yeah, like like all the women in their like pink, like whatever the outfits, and yeah, it was more of a phenomenon, yeah, than Oppenheimer was. I didn't see anyone wearing like fedoras or there was nothing like that for Oppenheimer.
yeah. And I thought Oppenheimer, I thought it was brilliantly made. So you go into the film, and it's like it's like Oppenheimer is studying, in Cambridge and other places, and you see him. He's first of all, they didn't do his childhood at all. I like that. I mean, I think that I don't know. I think childhoods are sort of overrated. They made people who they are. Yours was obviously very unique, but I think like most of the time, people just overrate. Oh, his mother, looked at him funny once, and that explained his genius. I mean, it's just very. It's always like these things are
That's
always like that.
interesting. Yeah, so
And
there's no explanation for his genius or no. Well, I mean, I guess one thing they could have done with a childhood, is just like as a little kid, showing
show him
his
being brilliant. Yeah,
prodigy,
show him.
like doing math
Yeah.
equations on his little
And I
tyke,
got, you know
little
what,
school board.
and I picked up the audiobook of them that it's based on, American Prometheus.
Prometheus. Yeah.
Yeah, and I listened to I listened to 1 hour out of 27 hours, so like 4% of it. So like the introduction and like the starting with his childhood, and it does. I mean, it does start with his childhood. So there is like at least one chapter that I'm reading that is honest justice. It's not like that was completely ignored.
Anything interesting so far from that? Any glimpse into
they were these Jews of the turn of the century. Like late 1800s, early 1900s. I mean,
He
they
was
were.
German Jewish.
Yeah,
Is that what?
yeah.
Okay.
His family was, his dad, and he was born in the U.S., but his parents, his mom's family was like second generation American, and his dad was, I think his dad came over. His dad came over, or the granddad. It was was the dad or the granddad? I forget. It was one of them.
What did they
Came,
do? What were their jobs? Like, what
they,
did his dad do for a living?
he was some kind of retail thing, buying and selling clothes. And his mom was like some kind of painter or something, but like really actually a housewife. And like the intellectual like sort of ferment of like this time was like fascinating. These people were accomplishing like amazing things. So like like the entire American nuclear program. You see, they were basically all Jewish, like almost all of them, right? And they were also like politically very active. Like they actually were like a lot of socialists and communists, and they founded this communities founded the precursor to the ACLU. They founded the NAACP. I mean, so basically, like the things that ended up shaping American culture in like every way. And so Oppenheimer was part of that. The book is like his parents like were. They were high investment parents. Like he would be interested in something like rocks or something, and they would like buy him rocks or take him to whatever looking for rocks. But like people, he was just seen as brilliant from a young age, and the way he's described is like brilliant and like shy, but like not like scared of people, like a quiet like arrogance, like a belief that he's better than other people, and that comes through. That really does come through in the movie. That's attractive to women. That's why Oppenheimer was able to sleep with all of
Oh,
his
yeah,
friends.
he was a womanizer. They even described him
him.
as a womanizer. The Matt Damon character, the general, was that the one? One of them described him as a. Oh no, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah. When he was trying to
yeah,
recruit him, they told me that you're an arrogant, womanizing, whatever, and like, yeah. That's right.
yeah.
Um,
And so
did he
you get you.
divorce? No. He just had the one wife. Or no? Did he?
I
Did
think
he have two wives?
no. I think he had. I think he had. Let's see, Oppenheimer. We just saw the film, so we should remember. No, yeah, it was just that one woman. It's very
The one
confusing because
wife. But
yeah,
he probably had. Well, they showed the one mistress, but it sounded like he must have had a few more that they didn't depict in the movie.
yeah, they mentioned a few in passing. So there was that communist girl. There was, and then like they mentioned, like one of the scientists turned against him because he had an affair with his wife in Caltech, and like he killed him with a broken heart. He's like, oh no, it was that part is not true. He never found out. And so Oppenheimer was quite that, and his wife, even he got her. She was married at the time. Remember, she was complaining about how unhappy she was, yeah, in her marriage.
Of the party.
Uh, yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, and so so you start with Oppenheimer, and he's studying, and it's like you can see the metaphor, right? It's like the nuclear blast is I think it's silent, and then it's the explosion. So you do get to like when they actually do the nuclear blast, you sort of see that, but then you also see like sort of this these sort of waves of sound come through the theater, and you also get like these moments of like silence, which are just like I think really really powerful, right? And then you have like Oppenheimer's psychology. He's like laying in bed and sort of losing his mind, and at the same time he's got this like these psychological problems, and then at the same time like you're actually in the literal sort of it's representing the literal physics, right? And this was, I thought, very cool. Like, what did you think of that? These effects, which are like the first thing that you see when
Well,
you
do
go
you
there.
mean like when they sort of interspersed the scenes
Yeah,
with like whatever like images of atoms and like the very loud sound effects and the rumbling, and I think it was a little too much. I think it could have done with maybe 10% less of that. But I think it did, it sort of created this anticipation. I don't know if this was the intent, but it did. So throughout the movie, you see it's sort of interspersed with these periods of like him sleeping or sort of tortured and thinking about this and whatever, like the rumbling and the atoms, and then by the time the actual the Trinity explosion occurs, it's just pure, and you're anticipating this is going to be loud, this is going to be intense, and it's just quiet. And I think that actually created a stronger effect for that scene. And then it sort of built up into that sort of loud, like vibrating sound. And I saw it in IMAX too, so it was like a really nice effect. But yeah, early on it was just like a lot of that, and I think it could have done with a bit less. But yeah, overall, I thought that yeah, it was well done. The final hour I thought dragged a little bit, where it was like like that final hour was just who's it, like Strauss, attempting to sully Oppenheimer's character, and it was just sort of that the black and white going back and forth between those two, and that to me was less interesting than Oppenheimer's life and the building of the bomb and the Manhattan Project and the recruitment. And I don't know, like the last hour didn't really. It's like I enjoyed it and I stayed with it, but it was just the weakest part of the movie for me was like him and Strauss.
Well, yeah. So it's like, yeah, that's like the so like 2 hours. He's building the atom bomb, and like getting to that point. And then like last hour, it seems sort of like petty because it's like it's like his like rivalry with Strauss, which is not about like winning World War II. It's just like him and Louis Strauss. So it's like
It's just a sort of a reputational battle. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I think that's what makes it a biography. I mean, it's like that like to him, right? Like that's a human's life, right? Like you do something important, and like oh he developed the atomic bomb, this more thing, but like to him, like it's like his friends and his reputation and his marriage, and this guy trying to screw him over, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that's what makes it a biography, right? That's why I like that you have both of that. You have the importance of the Manhattan Project and what was going on with the scientists, but then you also, I mean, it is called Oppenheimer. It's not called, the atom bomb.
Yeah, I get. I mean, yeah, I just wasn't expecting that from the trailer and from the buildup of the movie and some of the like the interviews I read with Nolan, and yeah, I just wasn't expecting so much of it to be about this like reputational attack and this sort of
But it
backbiting
was
back
more.
and forth.
It was more than that, though. It was a way to grapple with the effects of the bomb, like through Oppenheimer and through like the questions and his psychology, right? Like what he was doing, right? Um, so it was like he has they go back and they look back at his life, and you look at the earlier scenes of the movie, and then you see it in like a new way when he's actually being interrogated. And then you see his activities sort of in a new way, and you look back at like how he was, and then you look at the testimony. You get the testimony of Teller, and you get the testimony of Colonel Groves, and yeah, it's I think it was great. I think
Yeah,
it built.
it does provide different perspectives on Oppenheimer as a character, and yeah, so it sort of flips back and forth between like, well, I guess like ultimately it's all subjective, right? But like I guess the colored scenes of him working on the Manhattan Project, that's sort of from Oppenheimer's perspective, and it makes him look very good. And then from the accounts of the Colonel and of Strauss and everyone else, you sort of see a different portrayal of him, a different layer of his character that is maybe more objective or at least different. And so yeah, I guess that was effective too. But yeah, I did like what you said in your review about how there is that sort of Robert Trevor self-deceptive layer there of or he becomes a communist because that's the cool thing to do. Then he builds the atom bomb because it's World War II and that's the cool thing to do. Then he turns his back on the project and has this sort of retrospective guilt because that's what you're supposed to do. And I'm sure if you sat down with Oppenheimer at each point in time, he would be completely sincere in his belief in that moment that communism is the right thing to do. Building the bomb is the right thing to do. Not, I regret building the bomb. That was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I thought that was very well done. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and like the fact that not only he's pro the atomic bomb, he's pro dropping it on Japan. He's like one of the only ones who actually wants to drop it on Japan, right? Like all the other scientists are like Germany is defeated, and like maybe we don't need it. And he's like, no, we got to demonstrate to the world that like war is like bad, like the nuclear, the atomic bomb is bad. And so like that to me was like, wait a minute, that's like he wanted to believe, he wanted to believe that at that point. I like when he puts on the like the general's outfit or whatever, the military uniform, and then his friend, I forget which one, the fatter one, the scientist tells him, take off you're a scientist, but you could see Oppenheimer like the power,
He
right?
was leaning into it. Yeah, he liked it.
He liked it, exactly. I mean, this is the brilliance of Nolan. Another thing about like the book, so just the introduction, from the introduction, like you think, oh, maybe Nolan like was just going by the book, but like it's interesting to see like where he deviated from the book, because I haven't read that much, just the introduction of like the first chapter or so. But like according to the introduction, it's like very like typical like liberal sob story. Oh, this was all just bad. This was just McCarthyism. Oppenheimer's left wing politics were like so great. He was just completely sincere. In this anti war stuff, or this arms control stuff after World War II. And then from the film, it's much more ambiguous, right? And so you see that sort of like, Nolan didn't like come out and just tell like a McCarthyite, World War II sob story. I mean, he told one. I think it's actually pretty.
It was well done, because either way you could believe it, right? The way that the movies depicts him is like, you could believe he's a communist, or like a serious communist, or he just had sort of sympathetic ties to it, and I mean, it was relatively, it wasn't super ambiguous. I mean, I thought it was pretty clear, especially like before he was recruited, that he was sympathetic to communism. And there was even a scene with the colonel where he said something along the lines of like, you didn't recruit me despite my communist connections, but because of them, because you knew you could control me, right? Like by sort of serving the government, this like he had no he didn't really have much freedom. He had to do this thing because otherwise they could have come after him for his communist ties. This was sort of his way of escaping that, of sort of exonerating himself. And
no, I don't think so. I think they weren't going to come after him. I mean, they just left him alone if he didn't want to join the Manhattan Project. But
you think that if he had refused the Manhattan, you don't think they would have found ways to coerce him?
I'm sure some people refused, and nobody was arrested or anything.
Maybe not arrested, but harassed, or had their lives disrupted in some way.
Probably wouldn't have been great for his career, but I mean, I think I'm sure some people didn't, and then it wasn't Stalinist Russia or anything. Nothing.
Oh, no, nothing like that. Sure. But then why that line? Why would he say that line then?
Well, because he wants to. Well, because to keep. Why not? I mean, because he wants to keep track of communists, right? Like that's just still a good way to keep track of communists, which you want to do anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, what I mean, like the line of like, you didn't recruit me despite it, but because of it. So they wanted to monitor him, and this was a way to sort of keep him closer.
Yeah,
and to potentially like not lose him to the Soviets. I don't really know like the history there of like how
far
along the Soviets were.
Nobody's so
no one defected. Well, maybe not directly, right? But like, were there not, like the movie did depict spies, right? Like, were there not spies in the Manhattan Project that like leaked secrets to the Soviets?
It came out that the British, the British guy was the spy.
There were a lot of British people spying for the Soviets during the Cold War.
And that's the thing. Like Oppenheimer and the scientists, Klaus Fuchs was that guy, and so like they. This is why I think it's like I said that in the film and the review that the hero of the film is the American system, but then because they were right. Like Oppenheimer, they explicitly argue about this. Oppenheimer and the rest of the scientists, think that even Oppenheimer, he tells them afterwards when they're in the atomic energy commission, they're having, I think, in the meeting. He tells them, no way, nobody was a spy, nothing, no spy. It comes out, yes, there was a spy. Like Oppenheimer just made this categorical. They argued about this during the Manhattan Project itself, and so Oppenheimer was just like so certain of this, and he turned out to be wrong. And Groves is supposed to be the good guy. I don't know, these people who think it was like an anti-McCarthyist film. I mean, like the hearing on Oppenheimer got to the truth. Like everyone, like they said he was like a loyal American. We all say that, but like these people,
but he wouldn't pass a security clearance, which makes sense.
Based on true, based on exactly, based on the law and based on the truth. And Groves, who's a good guy, even though Groves does say I couldn't have clear any of those guys at this, based on based on the law now.
which is really interesting, right? Like that is a sort of a unique insight into like many of the smartest people, the intellectuals, the intelligentsia. There was this fascination and love for communism or socialism during that time, right? Like there's something interesting about how the bomb was ultimately built by a team of communists, but for the American system.
Yeah, I mean, because they were Jewish. I mean, really, the Jews of the time were overwhelmingly socialist or communist sympathizer. This was the argument that the fascists make and that the fascists were very angry about. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I wonder. I mean, I wonder how many. Like, I'm trying to think of like the non Jewish ones, but there weren't that many non-Jewish scientists involved in the Manhattan Project. I mean, they really were like this was like a sort of a unique, small group of people from a small part of the world that contribute all these things to physics, which is really amazing.
Yeah. You made that point in your review, right? Like this is a kind of like a liberal fantasy of like how racism actually hurt the Germans, right? Because they were unwilling to use what they termed Jewish physics, right? Like anything discovered by Jewish scientists was like by definition must have been inaccurate, and so then the U.S. recruited these scientists, and everything they said turned out to be correct, and then sort of the anti-racist or the anti-Semitic crew ended up triumphing because they held the proper the moral beliefs and the scientific beliefs and the victory. It all sort of came together as one, which I
Yeah.
could imagine that would be like very very gratifying.
And any other producer, like first of all, they don't experience anti-Semitism in America. Groves just says, our secret. Like once Oppenheimer, he's pronouncing his name and he says, "Oh well, either way, they know it's Jewish." Haha, like he makes a self-deprecating joke, but that's it. You don't see him like you don't see anyone treating him differently.
Not in
Um,
America. There was that scene. They
yeah,
were on a train, I think, in the Netherlands, where Oppenheimer is sitting across from another physicist, and they said something about their shared Jewish lineage, and then the other guy tells Oppenheimer, like, do you ever have trouble? Something along the lines of like, yeah, do they ever give you any trouble here, or like, do they have trouble for our kind here, something like that? And Oppenheimer says something like, "Do you mean physicists?" And the guy laughs. Because clearly he's saying like, do you ever have difficulty being Jewish here in
yeah, but
Europe?
this is 1930s
Um,
Europe. I mean,
yeah, which is
this
right,
was
exactly. So I'm just saying, like, they only showed that scene in Europe, but nothing like that in America, because America was actually legitimately less anti-Semitic
But
during
if
that
you actually
period.
read like liberals who write about the time, like no, it was a terrible time where like even the biography has a
Couldn't get into the
little bit
country
of
clubs.
yeah. You couldn't get into the country clubs. You couldn't whatever
Yeah,
they looked at the Harvard quotas, right? Which like now
Harvard
conservatives want to
quotas.
bring up and liberals don't want to bring up, right? And there is a little bit of that in the book, not tons of it though, but there's a little bit of it in the book. And so the fact that Nolan didn't, uh,
Yeah. Yeah, you
get it
could
pretty.
have. Yeah, I guess like if you a certain kind of filmmaker would have had like someone like Colonel Groves, right, who's this sort of like down home American military officer, could have like made a little snide remark or something, but he never did, right? Like there was none of that from any of the American characters.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And they're like, no, like they could have just shown like some redneck in the South or something. This would have any other producer, I want to say, would have done this, right? Um,
Mm.
the and like yeah, I mean, so this is and so like and also there's no feminism. That one female scientist shows up like they didn't teach typing at the at the Harvard chemistry course. It's like I was like, okay, come on, you're on the team. That's it. That's it. No other.
There
That she
was no overt
experiences.
feminism. There was that scene with it wasn't like it was not explicit, but you have to have these kinds of scenes where Emily Blunt, Oppenheimer's wife in the movie, they're cross-examining her. I don't know what they're interviewing her,
Yeah, that
interrogating
was funny.
her, and she like has all the right answers. She's very quick. She is clearly smarter than she's the smartest person in the room, kind of thing. So if you don't have any overt feminist talking points, you still have to have like a strong female character who's clearly smarter than all of the men, despite just being a housewife, despite not having the same level of education as any of them. She's like
Yeah,
clearly like miles ahead of
I
the
don't know about the
sprinting
history.
laps around
Yeah,
them.
maybe she was the best, best at the hearing. I don't know. Like I wasn't.
Possibly, but there was nothing in the movie to suggest that, right? That she would be so much smarter than all of those guys and have like, I think there was like even a scene where she sort of had like a bit of knowledge about the law and what her rights were in that situation. And like, okay, well, like how many, even educated housewives, were they knowledgeable. I don't know, but you're right. Overall, like it was
Yeah.
even keeled.
Now the women at the time, I mean, like women, high class American women were like, they were housewives. They were highly, I mean, they valued education and reading to a large extent. So they probably knew a lot. Uh, the yeah, the yeah, and so yeah, the and like the there was a few black faces of these like 1930s physics, which I thought was funny. Like I don't think there were any. Like there were like two or three. You would see them every now and then. There was one Chinese or East Asian guy I saw in like Cambridge or something. That could have been possible, but even that I think
There were a
especially
few Japanese students
yeah.
in Cambridge. Yeah, I visited the library here like a year ago, and like yeah, Emperor Hirohito, like the Emperor of Japan during World War II in the 1920s, he studied at Cambridge.
Uh,
So
yeah.
there were like a handful of
And
Japanese guys who
maybe
were
that was your
studying
hero.
here.
Maybe that was
That would
cool.
have been amazing, actually. Yeah, well, yeah, we got to look that up. Was that one
They have
Asian
these little
guy?
they have
That
these
was
little cameos, like when Strauss goes down in the Senate, like this young senator John F. Kennedy. It's like these little
mm,
cameos of these people who are like,
little something for the audience.
yeah, just like you remember, yeah, all these these names from history. Yeah, what do you think about like when they had like what do you think was the pattern behind the black and white versus the color?
I mean, wasn't the at least my interpretation of it was the color film was that was Oppenheimer's perspective of what was going on around him, and then the black and white. Well, I guess like the black and white examinations and interrogations that was supposed to be a sort of the view from nowhere. This is like an objective view of what's going on, and then the recollections from each of the people that's supposed to be their sort of subjective recollections of what Oppenheimer was like. Um, so it kind of took multiple different points of view, which I guess like, sort of kept it interesting in a way, just like how you keep someone's interest for 3 hours, right? And so, yeah,
Yeah,
what did you think of it?
yeah, although yeah, they weren't all flashbacks. Like the actual Manhattan Project, that was like they didn't ask him about the moment to the bomb detonated. So I didn't see everything that happened in the past as a flashback. Um, the
Well, right, yeah. Well, that was I think that was from Oppenheimer's perspective, right? Like when the
Yeah,
bomb
yeah,
went
but
off.
but it's not. I mean, it's not a flashback in the film, in the context of the film. It's just the thing that you're right. It did happen from Oppenheimer's perspective.
Which is
I
like, so Nolan did this before in Memento. He had this sort of black and white version. Did you ever see Memento?
No, I haven't seen it.
It's worth watching. But he does it's not exactly the same, but it's a similar device that he uses with like black and white as a flash back and then color as a flash forward, and he sort of plays with time in this way based on the color of the film. And so yeah, it was really interesting to see
There's a
that
better
sort of
yeah
device
there's better
again.
Better Call Saul, which you didn't like, but yeah, that had a lot of that too. Did Breaking Bad have that? I don't think so. It was just all Saul. Uh, the Yeah, yeah. So the what was black and white? It was the Strauss stuff. It was so I think that the color. So usually color is future and black and white is past, but this was different. The early 50s was black and white, and like the 20s and 30s and 40s, early 40s were color. And I think it sort of it shows. I think what it shows is sort of the great moral struggle of World War II, the clarity of it, and then the sort of the passions of youth. The ambition, the sex, the finding romantic partners, all of that stuff. The young ideological experimentation, all that stuff. You have the youth, and then you have like sort of the American World War II effort. And then what's color? It's the ambiguity of the Cold War and post-war American society, and then also just like getting old and like sort of looking back and not having all that sort of spunk and fire and like future plans. I think that's sort of what's going on
He's a
there.
bit more subdued. All of the characters. I mean, Oppenheimer throughout is a pretty subdued guy. What did you describe earlier? Like that quiet arrogance. That comes through, but yeah, he's definitely less energetic towards the end. And I thought, like, yeah, it was subtle, but it was played pretty well. That when he's a student, when he's studying, when he's ambitious, when he's trying to make a name for himself, he just sort of, appear more sort of sprightly and more switched on. And you can tell, like, by the end, he is I guess one argument is always because of his age, another is because of his lingering guilt over the bomb. I guess those aren't mutually exclusive. It can be a bit of both, the guilt and the age sort of getting to him and gnawing at him over time. which yeah, I thought that was yeah. Cillian Murphy did a good job. I think he even lost. Like you could tell he must have lost quite a bit of weight because he's already a pretty lean guy. But then to get that sort of gaunt look of Oppenheimer, yeah, he's very svelte, and yeah, I thought he embodied the character like really well.
Yeah, yeah, I thought so too. You say his name is you pronounce it Killian Murphy?
I'm pretty sure it's Killian. Yeah, he's an Irish actor. I've seen him. Yeah, not in person, but like in interviews and stuff. And I'm like 90% sure it's pronounced Killian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. So, was your interpretation of the film? Um, like, do you think was yours similar to mine that like Oppenheimer was sort of a flawed person and like the American system worked, or did you have a sort of a different take?
Yeah. I mean that I think I like that interpretation of it. Yeah, that in a way, the American system works so well that they were able to recruit scientists that were sort of against it, right? Like fundamentally against the principles of capitalism and free market, and yet still the country is so what generous and appealing. In a way that is kind of a liberal's dream too, right? Like we're so open minded, so free, and so willing to tolerate disagreement and dissent and so on that we're able to do that. And then I guess the sort of the McCarthyism aspect of it too. Um, but I would like to know, like, do you know with McCarthyism, what were the like actual sentences or penalties? Like,
Nothing.
if
They
you were
weren't
an
like,
actual like,
yeah,
if you were serious like communist, what did they do to you? Like, what did the U.S. government do to you? Like, they
nothing.
weren't
Not give you
arresting you.
no, not give you security clearances, or maybe there was like blacklists in Hollywood, so maybe not give you the jobs. But no, it's the most exaggerated. I mean, it's the most exaggerated
That's
thing
my
you can.
understanding as well. I've heard Brian Kaplan talk about this too. And at least, sort of secondhand sources that I've seen is that McCarthyism is very much overblown and not nearly the sort of social, uh, what, movement or like the fear from it wasn't nearly as great as people tend to remember it being or
Yeah,
claiming that it
because it
was.
was the left. I mean, it was because it was going after the left, right? That's why you have these remembrances um,
Yeah.
that are like that exactly. And yeah, it's not. I mean, it's like it's a little bit of it, but it's not portrayed as like it's like not so unreasonable. I mean, it seems commensurate with the prime. McCarthy himself is not shown because McCarthy is like actually the worst. Like he was like a kind of one of these like stolen election types today. It's like the worst representation.
he,
Like of
would- he
the
would say
just big,
2020 was he
yeah.
would have
I
been at
mean,
the Capitol on January
he would have all
6th.
the terrible evidence. He would have Venezuela, talk about
Would he
Venezuela
be an
and
anti-vaxxer?
I don't know. I don't know, but he was like the so like if you want to make McCarthyism look bad, you use McCarthy. You have him sort of play a role, and yeah, he himself just is barely mentioned. Um, Even Strauss like goes around McCarthy. He's like McCarthy's a clown. I have to to actually do something effective, you have to go around him. Uh, and so
Oh,
yeah,
right. So that's interesting. So they even undermine or like show how unserious McCarthy was,
yeah,
or
like how
how
even like ineffective
yeah
he is.
minimizing
Right.
his yeah, right, okay, like the enormity of who he really. Well, yeah. So that's interesting too. Yeah. So in a way, yeah, I felt like it did seem like a relatively accurate portrayal of that period. And I mean, they made it seem like very high stakes whether Oppenheimer would get a security clearance or not. But like in the end, like how much did he really want it? And ultimately, I mean, yeah, yeah, like you said, like the system worked. If he had received the clearance and continued to work for the government, based on everything we saw in the movie, at least, I haven't read the book. I don't know, skim the Wikipedia page, but it wouldn't surprise me if, had they given him the clearance, if he did start sort of selling secrets to Soviets or Soviet friendly allies and, continue his ties with those communities and sharing that
Well, I think it
information.
was a different. I think it was a different time. I think it was like it was the. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he. Yeah, I mean, in the 1930s, this was like Hitler. I mean, Hitler was like sort of had these Jews were very anti-Hitler, obviously, and so the Soviets were seen as. So even in the 1950s, even Stalin goes anti-Semitic. That's the other big thing that happens. And so these Jews don't. And Stalin starts, locking up Jewish doctors and thinking they're going to poison him and stuff. And so like the
But
American Jews, like if
there was still like a pretty strong communist streak among the intellectuals in America, even in the 50s, right? Like my understanding is like they didn't really turn their backs on communism until I think, yeah, Stalin's crimes didn't really become sort of widely known and accepted, and the denial sort of ceased in the 1960s, right? 1960s, maybe early
No,
1970s. They clung to it for a long
50s.
time.
I think 50s people. I think 50s. It was different from the 1920s and 30s. I think
I
the
don't
50s
know. I
was.
think like the 60s and like that period, right? The sort of American period, like the 1960s in America, right? Like I think a lot of intellectuals still like had some
A lot
fascination
did,
with
but
it.
it wasn't like the 30s. It wasn't like the 20s and 30s. You go to
I
the
mean, they were
Nation and the New York Times. They're
they were
programming.
refusing to cover like the Cambodian genocide, and like all the way into the
Oh no, but
1970s.
no, that's different. The East Asian, the Maoism was also like like they sort of gave Chinese communism a little bit of a chance.
So they okay. So the Soviets are bad, but we'll switch over to
Yeah,
Maoism
I mean,
and the
everyone
Khmer
knew
Rouge.
yeah. I mean, there was hope of yeah, like Maoism. Like they like Mao more
Yeah.
than they like the Soviet, like the like
Okay.
straight
So fair
people.
enough then. So then Oppenheimer may not have disclosed secrets or confidential information to the Soviets, but whatever to the Maoists, to the Chinese, to the
No, I mean, but
Cambodians,
that
like
was it wasn't the same.
the Cubans.
They didn't have
Yeah.
they didn't have like the networks that the Russians did. It wasn't like Mao was like some great spy master
But
with
would
control
you?
over
I mean,
everyone.
okay. So you're saying you would give Oppenheimer the clearance? No worries.
No, I'm not. I don't know. Maybe
I
I think he's just yeah he's got
I think
bad
they made the
judgment.
right call, Richard.
Yeah, maybe they did. I don't think he's going to sell secrets to communists. I think that even if he has bad judgment, he'll talk to a reporter or do something stupid. Um, or like think he's like smarter than everyone and should like control the program or sabotage it or whatever. I mean, there was a lot of reasons to be sort of skeptical of Oppenheimer. And he was old. Like it's like maybe McCarthy. It was like people get old and like they shouldn't just be in positions of power forever. So like maybe he wasn't the best scientist in 1954 or whatever that year
Well,
whatever
by
year
that
he
point, he
lost the
probably
Soviets.
wasn't. He was probably in some kind of supervisory role or an advisory role, or he probably wasn't like doing
Yeah,
any serious work on any sort
yeah.
of
He
nuclear
was like yeah he
development.
had left physics behind. Yeah, he was like 50 at that point. Um,
Sure,
yeah,
but someone like that, man, like even if he had any hiring decisions, like there's just like a lot that could go
yeah. He
wrong
tried
with
to sleep
someone
with all his
who,
underlings' wives. I mean, yeah. There's a lot of good
yeah,
reasons to. Yeah, I mean, but he's old now. Again, he's old, so who knows if he still even does that.
he still looked good though.
Yeah,
Men age
yeah.
like wine.
That's true. Uh, yeah, yeah. So yeah, okay. Let's move on to
I will
Barbie
say
unless there's
that
anything else.
Emily Blunt looks a lot better than Oppenheimer's real life. I googled her, and
Wait, which one?
I mean Killian Murphy looks a lot better than the real Oppenheimer. To be fair, but the distance between the actual life and Emily Blunt is like very very stark.
I think that the real Oppenheimer. Let me see the real Oppenheimer. I think the real Oppenheimer actually was. I mean, it was pretty. Yeah, he's obviously an actor usually is a little bit better, but it's a remarkable. It's a pretty good resemblance.
Oh
He's
sure,
got
sure, yeah.
he's
I'm
got
not
that
saying yeah,
emaciated
but
face.
yeah,
Uh,
he wasn't a bad
the
looking guy. Yeah,
yeah.
even in his old age, right? You look at old pictures like Oppenheimer when he gets older, and he still has most of his
What do
hair.
you
He's still thin,
What do you
sharp
think about
features.
communist girlfriend Jean? What was it? What was her name? Her name was Jean Tatlock. She was played by Florence Pugh, Pugh. How do you say this girl's name?
Jean Tatlock. Yeah, she was a psychiatrist. Oh yeah, they made some remarks about like Freud and Jung, and I was wondering about that too, and why they were discussing psychoanalysts and what
It was
connection
just
they
one of those
had.
things at the time. It was like they were into. It was
Yeah,
like communism and like Freud.
right. Those were the
Uh,
intellectual fashions of the era. Um, oh, okay, yeah. Well, you can almost understand why Oppenheimer might have had an affair because Jean Tatlock looks different than Oppenheimer's wife, and
yeah,
people
the
can
Jean
look them
Tatlock is,
up.
but
She
the
actually does look
Florence
quite
Pugh.
good. Like they look similar, the actress and Jean
Yeah,
Tatlock.
yeah, yeah, but the actress looks really good, and she's actually sometimes they make people thinner. She's actually I think, a little bit chunkier than the real life. She's like more, she's more,
Whiter
more
faced, yeah. Bit,
yeah, sexier, right? Sexier in like the the full figure woman sense. Um, Yeah, then you look at Jean Tadlock. I'm trying to find more than one picture of her. She's actually she has like a modern. She has like the modern, non-feminine look. Like you know how like attractive women are becoming like the women presented as attractive have been like becoming more masculinized. Have you seen this? Like in the 19 like pretty actress 1940s versus like 2010, but she'd like have like a sharper nose and like darker skin tone and like all these things that like are associated with more masculine traits. I'm saying the real life Jean Taplock like had that. She had like the 2010 attractiveness. Although the hair, anyways, I'm very passionate about
Yeah, I did.
women in
Yeah, he's
Hollywood.
yeah, very invested in this. I mean, yeah, like yeah. I mean, I think Gene Tatlock. She is like the real Gene Tatlock. She was an attractive woman. Oppenheimer's wife, different appearance.
Yeah, let
Um,
me let me take another look at Kitty Oppenheimer. Let me see. I
I
forget what she. I
mean,
saw. Oh, she really. Oh my goodness. Sorry, Kitty
yeah.
Oppenheimer, but yeah, she really wasn't attractive. Wow.
It would have been an interesting if
Well,
like the Wikipedia page.
what year
Like
are
the
these
Wikipedia
photos? Well,
page
yeah,
for
what year
Kitty
are these
Oppenheimer,
photos
Catherine
from?
Oppenheimer.
Catherine. Okay, this is 44. Okay, so she wasn't that old. Yeah, she was 44, so she was 19.
Imagine Richard. Imagine in the movie they casted someone who looked like the real Oppenheimer's wife. Like if
They
someone
would have
they
yeah,
did the
that would have
curlers in the hair, the style, the yeah, it would have been a
yeah,
different movie.
it would have been interesting, right? Because people are yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting. People might have had a little more sympathy for Oppenheimer, maybe, or maybe
But
not.
for
I don't
his
know.
philandering,
Maybe.
what do you mean? Like sympathy for what?
Like I don't know, he
Uh,
needed someone. He needed something else. Like, yeah, Have you ever seen this thing where like men who like attractive men who are with like ugly women are like rated like higher morally or something like that? I
that
think
was an
I've seen
episode
it.
of Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I don't remember any
Oh
studies
yeah.
on
Well,
this.
maybe I'm confusing scientific studies with Curb Your Enthusiasm. Might have been
I
a
thought it was
study.
the reverse. Well, maybe not morally, but the studies. So I
No
have seen
morally.
studies on this. Okay, I
Yeah,
don't know the morally studies, but in terms of in inferences about like general sort of social status, competence,
obviously, a
intelligence,
prettier girl is.
then the more attractive your wife,
But
the
it's
more highly
the
regarded
thing
you
is, I
are.
just have to say, the thing about these women and why it's hard to judge them is that the thing that looks different is the hair. That women like that. There's been advances in women's hair, and women with long hair versus short hair. They all have short hair because a long hair, I think, was harder to maintain back then, and they all look worse. And they all
Well,
look
because they
better.
didn't have straighteners and they didn't
I
have
don't. Yeah. So
relaxants
and
and
there was somebody told me on Twitter that there was a TikTok thing where like young girls would like use their mothers and grandmothers like hairstyles, and then like people would see like automatically like okay they're not as attractive. Like it's obviously the hair is what makes women today so much more attractive than they were in the
but
1940s or
there's a trade-off
1950s.
because women today are much more likely to be obese. And
Oh
so I think a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
guys would take bad hair and low BMI versus high BMI
Well,
and
but they
nice
have no.
long
But the
hair.
women back then had no. They didn't go to the gym though. They were skinny fat. I think that's the
I
problem.
think what skinny fat versus like dude, the average American woman weighs like 170 pounds. Like
Yeah,
I think
average.
skinny
Yeah,
fat, 120 pounds of skinny fat versus 170 pounds of modern American
yeah.
woman. I don't know. I weigh 170 pounds. Like I don't know. Like
Is the average woman? I mean, the average. There's probably like 500 pounders that are bringing that number up. I mean, is the average woman? What's the
so
median woman?
that's I think yeah. Is that median or mean?
Some women
Well,
are like
okay. So
800
so I'm
pounds.
inclined to believe that it's median because the number for men is like 193, and like 193 makes sense for men, right? Like that's not that high. They're still
Yeah.
fat. Like it's still fat for someone who's 5'9". Like it's still overweight, but for women, it's like that. I think so. I think that is the median
Well, what
actually.
about age? 173. You're
Mm,
counting everybody. So it's saying that between 20 and 39, it's 168. Okay, it's not that much better. Uh, okay.
that's a lot for some. The
All right,
average height
I
is five
like me
four.
and me and
Yeah.
Wilfred Riley like a little more
Oh,
cushion on
okay.
the cushion.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Noted.
not that much. Not American like West Virginia standards. But like like I'm not scared of 160. Like 160 is not like oh my god, that's the most disgusting thing ever. Depending on proportions,
Yeah.
the muscles. They're also you have to consider the muscle. They're stronger than they were. They work out
Right.
sometimes.
changes the BMI. I get it. Yeah. The muscle's
So do you think
heavier than
Florence Pugh?
fat.
Do you think Florence Pugh is attractive? She's pretty. I think. How much do you think she weighs?
Who's this? Florence.
That's
Who is this?
the Tatlock character, the woman who plays the communist woman.
Oh, yeah, I think she's fine. I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if she's 160 or 170.
I mean, well, in the movie, she didn't look that heavy. I did like her in Midsommar.
Well, here, maybe I have no idea what 770 pounds look like, because this website tells me she's 100.
She also has
maybe I have no idea what 170 looks like.
Well, her face, she has the kind of face that looks heavy, but then she you saw her nude in the movie, and she looked like like she was in perfectly fine shape. But she just has one of those faces, I think, that like gives the appearance of being heavier than she really is.
And the real life one doesn't have any of that. The real life one is just slender. Anyways, let's move on to.
Stop objectifying women, Richard. This is very anti-feminist.
That's what our audience is here for. And they want well, we're going to move on to talk about women and their emotions and feelings with Barbie, so we'll make up for it.
Barbie.
Let's do Barbie, and then let's do the contrast afterwards. So, I mean, is there anything I think it's just so. I don't think it's like there's difficulties in interpreting this movie. I saw conservatives trying to make it into something. I didn't see any liberals do this. I didn't see any liberals say this isn't really a feminist movie. Right. But I saw Helen Andrews on American Conservatives. Like, this is about being a millennial mom.
Wait, what is Barbie?
Yeah. It's like, what planet are you on?
Is that because what's her name? The Hispanic mother in the movie? Like, is that what she means by that? Like, I didn't read the Helen Andrews piece.
A millennial, it's Barbie. Helen Andrews, Barbie, a millennial mom movie. Move over, boomers. It's the millennials' time now. Greta Gerwig, director and co-writer of Barbie, is a millennial mom. There are not many of us, blah, 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 blah. That's where blah, blah, partner and co-writer of Nancy, blah, 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 blah. And then she says, she talks about Gerwig's older stuff. Barbie is a movie about how being a woman is difficult, just like Lady Bird is about how being a mom is difficult. In both cases, difficulty is worth it because it connects the person to the deepest kind of loves known to womankind. Sisterhood and motherhood. What planet are you? What? I can't believe this review. This is not what that's about. It's about.
Well, there are no wrong answers, right? Like, I think the Barbie movie really, to me, showed that we are in the era of, and I guess we've been in this era for a while, but especially now that everyone has a platform, there are no wrong answers for the interpretation of art.
Well, people need.
Everyone have their own agenda, their own axe to grind. Everyone saw what they wanted in that movie. It's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think I think my interpretation of it is right, and I thought yours, most of yours is right too. But it's just there are no right answers to this movie.
Very, very, very progressive of you. You know what? I went into the movie because I saw that Ben Shapiro thumbnail. You sent it to me, and other people making fun of it. It's like 43 minutes of destroying Barbie, and I didn't want to do. I wanted to be able to go in and say Ben Shapiro is wrong. Because that was just so cringe and so stupid, right? I wanted to say
lighting the Barbies on fire in that little trash can. I wanted
to say there's a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of this movie that lasted for maybe a third of the movie, and then it was like, this is just there's nothing deeper here.
I thought there was something salvageable there. I mean, if I did a sort of. I don't think this was intentional, but there is a reading of it that is a bit more right wing, which is essentially, I tweeted it was just it took a little work to fit it into 240 characters, but it's essentially so Barbie is in Barbie land. She is, she's unsatisfied with it. She starts to have thoughts, and she goes to the real world and discovers that it's a patriarchy. And then she returns to Barbie land and sees that Ken has turned Barbie land into a patriarchy, and she helps to return it into Barbie land. But then in the end, Barbie decides that she wants to return to the real world, which is actually a patriarchy. Why would she do that? Right. And so I guess the reading here would be actually maybe Barbie land isn't so great, and that the patriarchy is what she wanted all along.
Patriarchy is what she wanted all along.
Right? Yeah. Why would she left Barbie land, right? She left Barbie land initially, discovered the patriarchy, horrified, comes back to Barbie land. Oh no, Ken turned into a patriarchy, horrifying. Okay, let me go back to the real world, and that's that's the end of the movie, right? Like the end, like if you wanted it to be a typical feminist triumph, it would be her restoring Barbie Land to its rightful place as the whatever, like the ruling of the Barbies and the subjugation of the
Yeah,
Kens.
but
But
that's
she
not a
goes to
full
the real
life.
world.
That's not a full life to them because they're basically just wanting to be pretty. And so, like in feminist sort of ideology, like you have to sort of you sort of have to go out. You have to go out and sort of deal with the real world, right?
Yeah.
And she has to.
Well,
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if that's true,
Yeah,
right? Like, if like, I think in some sense, like that is what you like the Barbie Land, like the whole like opening sequence is just like how amazing Barbie Land is. Like all of your friends love you. All of the guys, like their whole objective is to be seen by you, to be looked at by you. Like you have all of this power, all of this, um, yeah, all of this status. And yeah, I think like that is, and then like, to sort of triumph over the Kens and like restore it to that. Like, why wouldn't that be I guess like that would be a sort of a straightforward feminist depiction. But then going back into the real world, despite, its horrors and its, at the end, like the final line about, she needs to see a gynecologist. And I saw, there were some funny tweets about that, about like, oh, is that what makes her, a real woman? She's not a Barbie anymore. She's a real woman because she has to see a gynecologist. Somebody paged Matt Walsh. So yeah, like I don't know, like why would she go back there? I mean, I thought the whole depiction of patriarchy was silly anyway, and I did sort of agree with like Shapiro and a lot. Like, it's not really like the whole like the scene where Ken discovers Barbie Land as a patriarchy. It's like, what does he see? He sees John Travolta in Grease from like 1973. He sees Sylvester Stallone in like one of the Rambo movies. He sees Bill Clinton. He sees like all these images from like the mid 20th century. I don't know which critic this was, but they made a good point, which is that if you wanted to show like what pop culture looks like today, what the actual scene of pop culture, it would look like the Barbie movie. It wouldn't look like Sylvester Stallone and Rambo in 1980. But we don't have those images anymore. And like, but then we kind of do, right? Because why didn't Ken see images of The Rock or Donald Trump? Or like there are modern day images of sort of overt
yeah. Well,
masculine
that's about the Rock.
machismo.
I mean, I don't know. It seems like you kick the Rock. It's like, what did he do wrong? Right. It's like
Yeah.
Trump. I mean,
You have to
Trump
show
is
the
too
bad
political.
guys.
Yeah.
Trump is too
I mean,
political. So then you
yeah.
show, but then you're reaching back into like the 90s and the 80s and this like John Travolta from Greece. Like
I mean,
half of
that's
the
just
audience, at
funny.
least half the audience, wouldn't even recognize that.
I thought that was just supposed to be like a caricature, like John Travolta in Grease. Probably because he's gay, and it's just like this old thing. It's like Grease.
There
I
is
just
like
thought that
in a
was funny.
musical, right? Like the Grease, like the whole movie of Grease
Yeah.
is a musical, and like that's supposed to be the
Yeah.
patriarchy is like
No,
him,
you're
like giving
giving
his
me. I
skinny
mean,
jeans.
yeah. Why did she go back? I guess that is interesting. I mean, I wonder if there is anything to that.
She's
So, like,
longing for it. She's longing for it,
yeah,
and she actually doesn't find Barbie Land as satisfying as
and she doesn't have any any hopes of like she doesn't have any attraction to men like at any point in the film, like not as a real woman and not as a not as Barbie. Like so we have no idea. So it's like well, this is one thing Shapiro said, just like men and women can only flourish when they completely ignore each other. There is no way that like they can that there's no even vision of them like getting along.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. Was it you who wrote this, or I don't know? But like, I thought that if this movie had been made like maybe 15 years ago, I think it would have ended with like a reconciliation with the Barbies and Kens. Like the moral of the story would have been like we're different and we want different things, but ultimately we can come together and rule together. It doesn't have to be one or the other; it can be both. And now it's like depicted as the zero sum game of like either the Barbies are in charge or the Kens are in charge. And if the Kens are in charge, then the Barbies have to be back in charge, but not, it is sort of like adversarial in that sense. I also thought it was interesting, sort of going along with this theme of like, secret desire for patriarchy, which I'm only saying this tongue in cheek, but they don't show like the brainwashing of the Barbies, right? Like, Barbie comes back, Ken installs the Kenocracy, the patriarchy, and all of the attractive Barbies are like enjoying serving the Kens, right? Like they're not enslaved, right? Like they're not being mistreated or beaten or like it's like, oh, he's mansplaining the Godfather to me, or oh, like I'm serving them beers, but it's not like they are whatever, like beating them or like forcing them to do something that they don't want to do. And they say, oh, they've been brainwashed, they've been what is it, like they don't have any defenses, like when the Europeans came to America. It's like like what, like how did that process play out then, of just like, hey, I have an idea, you serve me beer, and they're just like, okay, like So that didn't really make sense to me either. That like the idea here is that they were brainwashed. It's not the Barbies re-brainwashing them into wanting to be in power. It's that they were brainwashed by the Kens. And so, I think there was an interesting layer there that like actually the Barbies seemed to be enjoying themselves when the Kens were in
Yeah.
charge.
That's that is interesting. Yeah, you've given me a bit to think about. So, like for this to be like an anti-feminist, like secret anti-feminist allegory, it has to be very deep cover, right? I mean, because it's like if you're watching the film, if you are just watching the film, it looks like a women's studies. Now, maybe like this would require. This is not like it's like a Straussian reading usually has to be like sort of close to like what the surface thing is. It's not like, oh, a women's studies class, but it's actually fascism. Like it's usually not like that extreme, right? And like for people who haven't seen the movie, people are gonna watch. Like, trust me, they beat you over the head with it. Like Ken goes in the middle of patriarchy. They keep talking about patriarchy. Like the women go give speeches that are like, I mean, it's really, really beating into your head. And it's not like they're then proving wrong or something. I mean, it's like obviously you're supposed to clap and think that that they're being correct. So yeah, I tend to think you can find these things that are like sort of inconsistent. I think that the trying to live in the patriarchy, I think, is a good point. I just think these sort of like liberal principles, like they are. They're in conflict with one another. Like, go out and make yourself. Like, don't have like, don't be in a fantasy world. But at the same time, like, you should want the patriarchy, right? So, like, she's going out in the world, and and so that's how it has to end. Um, but yeah, it's you can find
They
you
had
can
that
find this
kind
stuff.
of
You can find
like
it.
there was that clash, right? Of like, they like, again, it's just it's not a serious movie, but there was like a lot of contradictory points attempting to be made. Where like the very beginning of the movie, right? You see all the little girls playing with the
Yeah.
babies, the little baby dolls, and then they smash them, and then you have like either the giant 100-foot tall, beautiful Barbie with the shiny legs and the perfect hair, and it's like the message here seems to be, you shouldn't want to be a mother. You should want to be this, whatever, this plastic emblem of like capitalist consumerism, and that you don't have to be a mother. You can be anything you want. So that's like one aspect of it, and then later the little girl, the daughter of that middle aged mom or millennial mom or whatever, she calls Barbie an emblem of fascism, and like you set the feminist movement back 50 years. So the beginning of the movie, it's like Barbie's about to advance women, right? She's telling you, throw off your chains, throw out, smash your baby dolls and become like me. And then the little girl is saying, actually, Barbie was bad for women. And then the mom delivers that Barbie speech about like, oh, you have to be pretty, but not too pretty. You gotta get a job, but you can't be too ambitious, and blah, blah, and on and on. And so it doesn't seem to have like a coherent message about like what Barbie is or what her purpose should be. It seems like ultimately what they want is like for Barbie to just like make women feel good, whatever their decisions happen to be.
Yeah, that's feminism. That's modern
you know?
feminism. That's exactly
Yeah,
what. That's exactly what
yeah,
it
yeah.
is. And
But the
then at the
movie
end,
didn't want to just say that, right?
no, they pretty much do say that the speech
Well,
from
through like
American,
three or four different like
yeah,
contradictory
the speech from
speeches and
American Ferrera is
events.
exactly like that. Our normal Barbie. Remember when she's like,
The
make
normal.
normal Barbie to Will Ferrell, and then
But the
he's like,
thing is, like, if you
shut your
had
mouth.
normal Barbie, then someone would say, "Oh, you're setting the feminist movement back because you're saying women shouldn't be
Then you'd have
ambitious,"
abnormal
right?
Barbie. I mean, then you'd have abnormal Barbie. It's like, or you could have, it's
Abnormal
very,
Barbie. There
it's
we
like
go.
doesn't matter.
We need to
Everything is
create an
okay
abnormal
as long
Barbie.
as it's woman.
Yeah.
As long as it's female, it's okay. Like it's just it's a therapeutic, it's just this therapeutic
So
ideology.
Richard, when I saw it in theaters on Sunday, like after that, like as soon as that speech was over, some girl in the audience shouted like, "It's hard." Like basically yeah, yeah, yeah. Like and
Which speech?
I
The speech about
I
the
was sitting
American
with my
Ferrera
girlfriend,
speech.
but I really wanted to say something like maybe not that hard. But yeah, so yeah, I thought that was what was
After the
interesting is like
glory
no one
speech.
clapped or anything either after America Ferrera's speech, the Barbie
Yeah,
speech. Some it sounded like a young woman or a teenager or something like it's hard, like oh it's nice to hear someone say voice there's a to express this opinion that I hold that we all hold. Um, but yeah, like so clearly that left a it remained with people, it stuck with people. I tweeted something about it, about like how this is just an insight into the self-pitying mindset, and it got some positive and negative reactions. But that was a very interesting speech, a very sort of unique glimpse into that sort
Yeah,
of
and
mindset
it's
of
like
like, I
men.
just want you to tell me that whatever I do is okay. Just give me validation regardless of my choices.
Yeah, and like the sort of so-called oppression that's coming from men, it's just like it's social pressure. It's the softest kind of like men. Ken could give a speech like that. Ken is like actually oppressed, right? And
In Barbie Land, Ken is he's subjugated. All the Kens are
yeah,
oppressed in Barbie Land. Yeah.
yeah, and so you're right. It's like and like so men could say there's pressure to do X, Y, Z, but men don't just sit around crying about their problems. That's why I said
A
one
lot of
thing to
men
stop
do.
them is
A lot of
oh
guys do bitch about their problems, but like
yeah,
no one
no one
cares.
cares.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The but the one thing I said that was like sort of a non-leftist sort of a sort of more conservative message is like there's no blank slateism in this movie, and that men and women are actually different. Like they're different, but it's just
Yeah.
like we should have the justice means like submitting to whatever women are feeling at the moment. Even the doll scene, it starts with like evolutionary psychology, like in caveman times, little girls are playing with dolls and dreaming of being mothers. Like that is like that's interesting. Um, and then yeah, it's like, well, why don't the men feel like the same social pressure to like do X, Y, and Z and like complain about it all the time? Well, it just seems like men and women are different. Right? Like and the Ken's like Ken, the fact that he has like so much confidence, like for so little reason, someone asks him the time, he's like, yes, I'm a respected man here. Right. So it is like it's a very yeah it's a unique kind of feminism. It's sort of it's therapeutic more than political, even though it is political, but it's primarily therapeutic. And then it's also non-blank slateist. It's also a difference feminism. Um,
Yeah.
and another thing, one thing interesting is they have the fat Barbie. Now I don't get why the fat Barbie is like because Barbies are it's like supposed to be in this plastic world. Like all Barbies are supposed to be attractive. Okay, why is there a fat girl there then? Why is there the trans Barbie?
You need to have
Is
representation.
they have I mean they have the represent, but they don't go like they don't have the guts to just make like half of them fat, like make them look like the American population,
That
right?
would be
So
that
it
would be really
like
funny if they made a Barbie movie and all of the Barbies were. That would be great. Yeah, yeah,
that would be great. That would have been great, but
yeah.
they don't
That'd
do
be
that.
so
They have a
funny.
few wheelchair Barbies. It's just like these little token representations, right? But like that shows you it's not like it's that shows you that Barbie is already like a liberal icon, right? The fact that it has like trans and fat people and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean the Barbie, like the scenes of like Ken were interesting because when he, so he goes into the real world and he like discovers this patriarchy, seeing images of Sylvester Stallone and John Travolta, and someone asks him the time, and so this bolsters his confidence, and then he like tries to get a job, and then you need to have a degree, you need to have an MBA or whatever, and and then someone says like, I think someone tells Barbie, oh, it's a patriarchy, we're just better at hiding it. And like, okay, but then like all of the evidence that the real world is a patriarchy is just like images from the 20th century, and then someone saying we're better at hiding it. And then the Mattel board is all male. But then if you look up the actual Mattel board, I think it's five out of the 11 board members are women. So, like they had to like, bend reality in the movie to show, oh, it's all male, the Mattel board. But then in real life, it's actually almost half female.
Yeah.
And so the whole like evidence of this place being a patriarchy was interesting. And like Ken being inspired by so little, right? Like even so, like being asked the time, seeing a handful of images, and that's like enough for him to think like things could be different. Oh, he checks out some books from the library, right? um,
Yeah.
someone on Twitter I saw say like they like tried to do I guess they downloaded the movie illegally or something because they froze it. They're like, what books are they? They were trying to find Bronze Age mindset. They didn't find it. Would be interesting to see which books he actually checked out that inspired him to start the Barbie Land revolution.
Yeah, he read those books pretty fast.
Like,
Yeah,
how does he know how to read? He doesn't seem very bright.
yeah, yeah, you're right. I think like the message. I think the simplest way is like Barbie, like she goes out of the world and people are like she's like I'm feeling this undercurrents. Here's how the Barbie is like supposed to be like an airhead and not know anything, but then she like knows like all these like feminist talking points. like under these undercurrents of violence, like in these men's tone. Ben Shapiro had a good point where like they tell her she's a fascist, and then she says something like, I'm a fascist. I don't make the trains run on time." It's like, wait a minute, how does she know what a fascist? How does she know what a
Yeah.
fascist
There's a lot of
is?
inconsistencies and things that don't make sense. Well, I do like how they were in like somehow like the place they oh yeah, well because they're going to LA to Mattel headquarters, but they're I think they're in Venice Beach, which at least last I saw it was in really bad shape, and like the only like the people who like give Barbie that uncomfortable feeling of danger are like, frat boys from USC playing volleyball, like just, good looking 22-year-old white guys with six pack abs who look kind of like Ken. And those are the guys, I guess there's that one scene with the construction workers at the end, but like they're all sitting down, right? Like they're not even like working. They're just like sitting on their, the lunch break or whatever. But like who's giving her this fear? Because like the real LA, like there's no junkies or vandals or gangbangers or like I want to see like how would the Barbie react in the real LA, not this like sanitized Barbie Land version of it of like, oh, I see a bunch of like handsome frat guys and they're making me feel afraid. I mean, that was kind of they like the movie isn't willing to show like what actually gives women fear, right? Like most normal American women, when they see like handsome dudes playing volleyball, aren't struck with this feeling of like anxiety, but they would feel that if like some scarier looking
Yeah.
guys
Well, the whole
were
lack of
around
treatment
them.
of race is very interesting because the Mattel board does the real Mattel board have any black men on it?
That would be.
Because it has
There was
two
one
black
black
men in the
guy. Was
movie.
it two? Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
there were
Yeah,
two.
why would they do that? So
Mattel.
so why did Mattel not like in the movie they could have made the Mattel board all white men, right? To like make the point extra clear that like, oh, things are really bad.
Yeah,
And yet
yeah,
they
because
chose to
it was.
have
I guess it's just too. Just it's the same reason. I guess they don't. They don't make like the trans thing is like they have the gynecologist. I mean, it's just like they forgot about trans in the movie too, and they did and they just like the world is just not race doesn't exist in this world. It's complete colorblindness. I think it's just lazy. I think they can only just do one thing at a time. So like they have the Asian guy who's like the number two kid, and
all
they have these
right.
like random like people of different races, in different places.
There were a couple of
But
black Kens too. Yeah.
yeah, of course. And then they call and then the teenage girl who calls. I mean, this teenage girl was like, it's like made me think of Zach Goldberg, like miserable young women with mental illness. I mean, it's like you can see just like the misery of. I like what her dad would. What does he say? That yes, we
Si
can in
se
Spanish.
puede.
Yeah, and she's like that's appropriation. I don't think you're supposed to laugh at her. I think you're supposed to laugh at the dad and say, actually, it is. I don't think it's mocking the young girl. I do think it's supposed to be genuine, like a genuine expression of like something we should all think. Yeah, I mean it's you have to. I mean, you just have to work hard. You just really have to. You just have to sort of work hard. What I said was like, yeah, it's blackpilling. It made me think like feminism was like an easy opponent because it's they're addicted to being blackpilled, right? They're addicted to the idea. They want to imagine a teleboard is 100% male. They want to imagine like everything is stacked against them. There's no sense of like here's what we're gonna do or here's gonna be like the political program. There's none of it, right? It's just like like what was wrong with Mattel introducing Dr. Barbie and telling them they can be whatever they want to be? Like, why did that fail? Like, why is that supposed to be just like another evidence of them like being bad? Like, what did they want them? What were they supposed to tell little girls in the 1960s and 1970s? Like, there's no answer to these things. It's just completely, mindless
Regardless of
complaining.
like what Barbie looked like or who, like there would have been a reason to complain, right? Like no matter what you did, um, you're either setting unrealistic expectations. So if Barbie's too accomplished, you're setting unrealistic expectations. If Barbie's just an ordinary woman or a housewife or something, you're lowering the bar or you're demoralizing women or you're not showing them what they could be. And so I think like yeah, kind of either way, there's no there's going to be a reason to be upset about this, about how Barbie is. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I think like in a way, the Barbie movie was an accomplishment in that like it did get a lot of people talking. It did very well at the box office. It was probably more entertaining than I expected. I think like in part because Ryan Gosling did a good job as Ken. And like I just remember like so much of these kinds of movies of like, oh, let's make a movie out of this character or this existing IP of this board game of this character. Like most of them are horrible, right? Like they're sort of like cheap throwaway, like, oh, we're gonna coast on the name alone, and I'm thinking, I don't know, something like Captain Marvel or something, or like one of these kind of, it just, yeah, I think the Barbie movie, it did have some layers, and the fact that it got a lot of people talking, in a way, it was like a success, and I'd never watch it again, but I didn't actually regret watching it. I did find it interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't regret watching it either. I got to have this conversation with you and a nice book review, and understand something about the culture. But yeah, I didn't think it was. I think it was. I thought it was a little bit entertaining at the beginning when it was like I thought there was a little more mystery to it. It eventually became just like when you get to the scene, like it's just the no I think the writing and the plot, the character, but it's all it's lazy, like
I
she
don't know. It's well, I think like overtly, yes, it's lazy, but there are ways to read it that make it more interesting. Like even the fact that like when the Barbie gets back and Ken installs the Kenocracy, like the only people resisting it is like weird Barbie and Michael Cera's character, the like I don't know whatever the sort of discontinued Ken, right? Like so you have this like androgynous male and you have this like whatever like mentally unwell woman, like these are the two people who are resisting the Kenocracy, but all of the normal Barbies, all of the normal female whatever, like they actually enjoy the like Ken's newly installed patriarchy. It's just the androgynous guy and the mentally unwell woman who are still resisting, leading the resistance and help to deprogram all of these poor women
Yeah,
who
I
are
think
who
this
are
makes sense
serving
from
the
like an
Kenocracy.
anti-feminist. This makes sense from an anti-feminist perspective, but I think the feminism is like it's so self-evident to like modern feminism that like it's so bad. Like it's bad to like be a housewife or to live for men or something. That like even if you say like they're happier, like it's like if like it's like to you how you would feel if like you were lobotomized and you became happy. Like that's how I think they look at it. So it's like even though those people are unhappy, they're still like the only ones who have any dignity or like reason for existence. I think that's what's sort of going on here.
Yeah. Well, I think like that's how you're supposed to look at it, but I don't think like
No,
yeah,
you
yeah,
can look
yeah.
at
I
it your
think
way. Yeah,
yeah,
I
they're
have my own,
different. Yeah,
like, I have my own anti-feminist interpretation. Yeah, exactly. That it's like, it's actually, they're all weird and ugly and they have no vision, a positive vision of like, what humans should be, what men should be, what women should be, besides sort of just do what you want. And like, you can't, like, I feel like the tone in the movie is just like so, it's so like, uncomfortable with like a heterosexual, like you don't see any heterosexual relation or homosexual relationships for that matter, but any kind of romantic relationships. The guy, the Gloria's husband is just he's just far away. He doesn't do anything. Appears in a few scenes. Ken and Barbie, they don't have romance. Barbie doesn't have any other romantic interests. What is men and women? Men just like occasionally hit on women and make them feel uncomfortable and violated, and that's it. That's the only like relationship between men and women in the real world. I mean, it's a very, very, it's a very sad worldview. I think it's like I think it's like not a very strong worldview. I don't think it has like a lot of appeal. Like I saw Michelle
zero
Goldberg.
romance, right? Like Ken and Barbie. Like again, like 10 or 15 years ago, like Ken and Barbie would have ended up together. Like it would have been
Oh,
a more typical ending.
or the well, actually, there is a little bit of romance when the Kens take over, and then like, but it's like that what we just talked about. It's like almost all these women who are just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
brainwashed
Where the
as the
guy's
only.
mansplaining The Godfather, and they're having a little movie night, and like, yeah, that's yeah, that's true. But you don't see anyone kiss for like when Ken like reaches out with his his lips puckered, and Barbie's just like
Yeah,
staring at him, saying like,
kisses.
"You need to leave." No one, yeah. It's weird. Like on the one hand, there's so many like there's overt like sexual innuendo. Like Shapiro complained about, oh, I'm gonna beat you off, like that
Yeah.
scene, and then like the scene about like, oh, I have like a fleshy lump under my pants or whatever, like the making jokes like that. And then yeah, like the gynecologist thing at the end. So there's those kind of innuendos and stuff or suggestions. But then there's actually like there's no actual romance. There's a lot of sex jokes, but no romance, which I think is actually kind of indicative of the times, right? Of like yeah, there's been this sort of evacuation of romance, but there's like a ton of like explicit sexuality and promiscuity and like the pornification of everything. But in terms of like actual like vulnerable, like the vulnerability that romance requires doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, it's perfect for like modern liberalism, right? It's like obsessed with sex, but also sexless. right? Like
Yeah.
people like obsess on their gender identities and not actually having relationships and getting sex. Yeah, I came away like not like Ben Shapiro, like because I don't, I think like angry because I think that like little girls went to see it for the pink, and I do believe in like sort of markets and human nature. That like okay, this was a success. And Michelle Goldberg basically wrote an article in the New York Times that said that like this is like proof that people like there's a market out there for women's stories. Like no, it's just the Mattel IP plus like the promotional story. And I watched the trailer, and I went back to see the trailer, and the trailer doesn't have a hint of this stuff. It just looks like a 1990s movie. It doesn't say patriarchy. It doesn't have any sexism. You almost think like Ken is going to be like the protagonist, and he's like the good guy or something. So it's I think it's a bit of a baited switch. Um, and so like I don't think this like actually like I think this stuff does influence culture like a little bit, obviously. I think it does, but I think it's just so ugly and so terrible that there is just a limit to like the damage like a movie like this can do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought the movie was like in the beginning. I was actually interested in it, and I thought it was going to go in a completely different direction. When like I thought it was going to be like actually something like what Michelle Goldberg was suggesting, maybe about like women's story, but in a, but set in Barbie world or whatever, because it does like initially follow that kind of like Joseph Campbell hero's journey trajectory of like, everything's great in my world and then something happens and it's causing me to like exit and like solve this problem. And so she goes in her little Barbie cruiser and like goes to the real world. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting, like Barbie in the real world or whatever. And then it just turns like from there, it turns into this sort of silly, like, yeah, like therapeutic, political, trying to make a statement. And there's a lot of sort of contradictory points being made. And I mean, it held my interest, it held my attention, but yeah, it was kind of not what I expected. But yeah, there, I ended up having a good time in a weird way, sort of appreciating it on an intellectual level. I mean, even when they were like handing out yeah, I just think like there's so much in this movie that like you can read from multiple perspectives. Like when they hand out the prizes, right? About like well, there's that one scene of like the Barbie shouting like yes, I have emotions and yes, I have thoughts, but it doesn't hold me back. Like it makes me stronger because of it. And then there's the scene where like one of the, all the Barbies win the Nobel Prizes. One Barbie wins a Nobel Prize in journalism. Another Barbie wins a Nobel Prize in literature. And those are all the Nobel Prizes. Like you don't hear any Barbie winning a Nobel Prize in physics or economics or any of the
Yeah,
sciences. It's just word cell stuff, right? And I'm like, was that intentional or was that like, is that a woman's dream of like,
no,
oh, a woman who wants to win
they
the
don't
Nobel
even think of,
Prize?
they don't even think of science. That's why I think it's like so you're seeing this stuff where it's like it doesn't even occur to them because like to them like so, like the possibility never
Science is boring. Math is
yeah
hard. No.
yeah the I think that like one reason you can like read it this way is that like the like any movie with men and women that tries to say something about sex is going to be like so complicated because this is like such a complicated thing that like you're going to be able to interpret it in like a lot of ways. So it's like you want to tell like a story about racism, like there's no way to do it where it's like there's a way to do it where it's like just easy black and white, like this innocent black man is walking to minding his business and this evil white person comes and does something to them. Men and women like and people have such strong scripts of like how men and women are different and how they interact with each other and like what their roles are that like it's like every like microsecond of like every interaction is potentially open to explanation, right? So I think it's like open to interpretation. So I think that's like why you can like have this movie, which I think again is like just like a women's studies seminar, but like can be interpreted in 100 different ways. Just because like that's the nature of like male and female.
Sure. And yeah, like, everyone brings their own biases and their own wishes and desires and all of that. They sort of project it on. And, in a way, I was trying to find that myself. Like what you said about like, I'm going to try to find something in this movie that's salvageable. And like, I know that Greta Gerwig or whatever, like, I know they didn't like the message isn't like women secretly want a patriarchy. I know that's not what they want. But like, I'm like, I'll impose this. I think it's an interesting, alternative,
Yeah. Well,
way to
some
look at
people told
this.
me check out Greta Gerwig's other work. I have not seen any of her other work, so like maybe that would change my interpretation. I don't know. Have you seen
I
anything
don't
with Greta
even,
Gerwig?
I don't know what else she's done. No.
It looks like I'm looking at the Helen Andrews piece, Lola versus Frances Ha, Mistress America. No, I haven't. The Yeah. Oh, no, she starred in these movies. It looks like she's an actress too. Let's see, Greta Gerwig. Let's see.
I googled Greta Gerwig and all of the Barbie
Yeah, me too.
fireworks went
Yeah, yeah.
off.
It's not stopping.
Okay, Lady
Uh,
Bird, No
wait, she's a
Strangers.
daughter. Her mom is an OBGYN. That's funny.
Huh. Maybe the whole thing was an
That's a,
advertisement to women to
for
go,
China
check your
gynecologist.
gynecologist.
That's funny.
So Nights and
Uh,
Weekends, Lady Bird, Little Women, Barbie. She's a
yeah,
writer
I haven't
on
seen
the
any of this
Snow
stuff.
White. Is this the woke Snow White with the like?
She's a writer for that Snow White movie. Oh my goodness, they're just gonna give her everything that's everything meant to be. She's gonna give her every IP of everything, every woman thing
Oh,
that ever
Gal Gadot
existed.
as the evil queen. That's interesting. So they're gonna
Have you seen
have.
the? Yeah, people have been talking about this on Twitter. Have you seen the clips where like the actress is like, "Oh, we're gonna overthrow the 1935's version"? Like it's just explicitly like feminist interpretation. I'm sure the right wingers will be able to say like this Snow White is actually also like secretly a right wing movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I'll do my best to support them. to find a right wing interpretation of it. To do a
Francis Ha.
deconstruction.
Francis Ha. So what is that about? That's is a Francis Holiday is a 27-year-old dancer. Anyways, that's another movie. Okay. Um, okay, so that's what we said about Barbie. You have any comments? I mean, I wrote a little bit about the Barbie Oppenheimer. I don't think they necessarily belong together. They just happen to be released on the same day. But there is some things we can say about like male and female, what they consider great art.
I guess
And
my
the way
I have like a sort of like this must be like maybe implicit sexism, but like in a way I almost kind of feel bad for Christopher Nolan that, that his movie like happened to have come out at the same time Barbie did, because he probably was not imagining like that these two movies would become sort of intertwined in the cultural imagination when he was working on that movie, right? Like making Oppenheimer must have, that was probably years in the making, like hours of stress and work and everything, and then it comes out with this movie, which probably didn't take quite as much energy and investment
I
to
don't think
make.
producers are that. I mean, I think the movie studios know what they're doing. I assume they knew. Like at
They would
some
have
point, they
different
knew Barbie.
audiences, yeah, but I'd like
Well, or
to
maybe they
like
thought it was
be.
there was a synergy. Maybe they thought like people are just going to the. I think it worked. I think Oppenheimer is probably bigger than it would have been. I mean, people
Oh, you
like
think so? So you think that like the counterfactual
I
effect
haven't
Barbie
been to
had
the
not been
movies. I
released?
haven't been to the movies in years. The only one I went because I have young kids, and so it's hard to get there. So I was the one I only been to one movie since the pandemic. Since 2019, really. I've only been at one movie theater. I saw Puss in Boots. I tried to take my son when he was like 2 or 3, and he wasn't. He couldn't do it. Um, and so that's it. So and then I saw two movies this week. I saw both Barbie and Oppenheimer, just because the conversation was Barbie and Oppenheimer. So actually,
Right.
Oppenheimer. I mean, Oppenheimer was. The movies are sort of on the downward slope. So it was sort of a synergy between them. And then people were talking Barbie and Oppenheimer. It might have helped both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you think it helped one more than the? Yeah, maybe you're.
Well,
I don't know. Like
I think
ultimately,
Barbie was
both
going to
were
be
very
huge no matter what.
successful.
Yeah, I think Barbie was going to
Barbie
be.
was going to be
You're
huge no matter
overestimating
what.
how popular Oppenheimer would be on its own because people are, it's just
Well,
like
I
a
think people
something.
really. Well, maybe that's possible. I do really enjoy Christopher Nolan's movie. Like that, the one movie I saw during the pandemic was Tenet, and I saw it like basically the day it came out, and that was like back when they were doing the weird social distancing in the theaters, and you had to like pull your mask down to eat popcorn and put it back up. But I went out and saw that. I actually didn't enjoy Tenet very much. So yeah, I'm like a generally an admirer of Christopher Nolan's movies, and so yeah, I don't know. I just think like it just seems like because Oppenheimer's such a serious movie, and then like with Barbie next to it, which I mean, again, like I enjoyed Barbie more than I expected. But yeah, that like, have those two movies be like Barbenheimer, like the whole thing. It's cute, but
Yeah, if they wanted, I
yeah,
mean, if they wanted to change it, like a month earlier, or like it was 6 months
they
or
could have
3 months
delayed
or
it. They
whatever.
could have changed it. Yeah, that's true. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it was
Well,
the
I'm
same
seeing
day.
yeah, same day release. Well, they weren't released on the same day, were they?
Yeah, they were. They were both
Oh, they
July
were.
21st.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
maybe that was timed then. I didn't realize it was the same day. Maybe in that case, like
Yeah, I mean, getting to
the
the theater
studios
makes
had
you
a.
likely to. Yeah, the getting to the theater, yeah, makes you just likely to want to get to the theater again just to see stuff. I mean, they try to give you
Usually
they try to
they.
give
I
you a rewards
mean,
card. Yeah, they tried
or
to give you a
well,
rewards card, and
usually
you have a chance
they
to
do
offset
like
everything.
they usually don't want like competition though. Like I don't know like how it actually works, but at least from my understanding of like studios and like publishers and everyone, like they don't like competition, And so if they have a big launch, they don't want any like
I
competitors
think
next
movies,
to it.
but I think movies have been really hurting since the pandemic, and I think that maybe they just like we got to get people to the theaters and having this
People have been
Barbenheimer.
calling this summer a flopbuster summer because there haven't been any good movies except these two and the Mission Impossible movie, which apparently underperformed. I'm going to go see it this weekend, but apparently that movie underperformed expectations. But like, yeah, it's been kind of a slow movie summer. No, yeah, there's no like big Marvel movies coming out. I hope we're past that time. Actually,
Well,
I'm
that's the
pretty,
hope of Barbenheimer. That's the hope of Barbenheimer. It's a whole narrative. Who knows if they're that sophisticated? But I saw people on Twitter being like, "Oh, maybe we're over the
superhero.
remake."
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
you
would
have
be
two
nice
original.
actually.
You have
In
two
that
original.
case, if it does like supplant the Marvel thing and like we have like a usher in a new era of movies, then I support the Barbenheimer movement all the way.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, the
yeah, no more
Barbenheimer.
superheroes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, it was good. It was actually good to be in the. I mean, it was good to be in the theater. I want to go do it. Yeah, I think I want to do it more often. So it worked on the Barbie. The Barbie campaign did work on me, and hopefully, yeah, there are future movies that like the entire country watches at the same time, and like me and you could talk about it, be part of the conversation. I think that's like it's good for the culture, and that's actually another reason I wanted to like Barbie because I wanted it to be like actually more sophisticated, more entertaining. But whatever, maybe it's gonna do the job anyway. We still have Robert Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer to inspire us. Anything else, Rob, that we missed or you want to talk about?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground for both movies.
Okay, then until next.
I'll see you.